Georgi, when you were growing up in Bulgaria, in the communist Bulgaria, what was translated actually to Bulgarian? I think some Russian literature, Soviet literature.
Actually, we had very good editions of the fairy tales by Andersen, and I remember that one of the first books I read was The Little Match Girl, and I think this book shaped my, I don't know, even my writing after that. This book, I was completely, what to say, I just read and cried, and I was crying when till I reading this book, and I think that for the first time I started to think about the death of these close people around me, and yeah, was very important book. But anyway, other books that were published and were my favorite as a boy were the books by Karl May and Mein Ried. These books for the Indians and all this Winnetou, Osceola, all these kind of books were very, very important. And of course, after that, we had these books for the Second World War. Most of them Russian books, of course. So this was generally speaking. But of course, we had Jack London, who was very important for me as a young boy who was trying to write something. So Martin Eden was very important book for me. Also, we had Erich Kästner. This was important author also for me. Yeah.
I think that in communist countries, these books for children were very, also from Western children books were quite important, because also in Poland it was, of course, Andersen, and in Poland it was also the Amicis. You know,
The Amicis, yeah.
The book Heart. I mean, things that were talking about poor persons,
Yeah.
and about poverty. Also, Jack London is about poverty. Yeah. It was also,
and that's why they were available in a way, also. Yeah.
Yes, that was also in Poland. It meant to shape some consciousness. But
did you have this Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer? Of course.
Yes, of course.
Actually, Huckleberry Finn was much more interested. Much more interesting than Tom Sawyer, because Tom Sawyer was a good guy, but Huckleberry Finn was more free, he's doing some bad things.
Yes, and it was on the road. It was a novel on the road.
Yes.
I also remember from Poland Huckleberry Finn very well. All these things, and okay, and. What about the American literature? Did you have American literature for adults? I mean, Salinger or Faulkner?
Yes. We had Salinger, we had The Catcher in the Rye, but it was the translation, because it's not easy to translate, of course, The Catcher in the Rye, because of the slang to follow, and there was no information about this reality, about this kind of even language, jargon, and so on. So I know that the translation was a bit old-fashioned. It wasn't my favorite book. I don't know why. I read it in my late 18s, so it was too late maybe. But anyway, I was in love with the short stories by Salinger, with Forest Mare, with Banana Fish, with all these stories. They were really, really important. And I wanted to write a letter to Salinger, knowing that he stopped writing. And I wanted to write him and to urge him, please, please write more and more stories, because we have this, in Bulgaria they were translated, these 9 stories. and that was all. So yes, Salinger, yes. Of course, we had a few translations of Whitman I found, and this was very, for me, it was very, what to say, it opened my mind in a way. Whitman, yeah. This poem, I'm Walt Whitman, Cosmos, and it was really, really important for me. Also some poetry by Emily Dickinson, some poems by Emily Dickinson, which are in a way completely different from this, what to say, energetic writing of Whitman. But anyway, they were also important for me because they had this view for the details. I really loved this voice of Emily Dickinson. Yeah.
But how was the impact of these things? I mean, when you talk about Salinger and Catcher in the Rye, because I remember it from Poland, of course, and the impact of American reality. I mean, the objects, the cars, money, and going, and it was quite different from the reality of socialist countries. I mean, it was also the objects were different, the atmosphere was different.
Yes, maybe that's why, I don't know, I was more familiar with this, what to say, novels about America in the time of cowboys and Indians, this kind of America, but I was not so familiar with the other one. When I was in the gymnasium, I was happy to buy some American books. They started to publish them, but if you want to buy, let's say, something like The Godfather, let's say, or Erwin Shaw, Rich and Poor, I don't know if I translate correctly the titles, you should buy these ones, but only together with some Russian classics, like Fadeev, you know, Mlada Gvardia.
Young guards, yes.
Yeah, or something like this. So that they sold you only together with. If you buy one of these, you should buy one of these as well. So that's why I remember forever. I bought Erwin Shaw together with Dmitry Furmanov, Iron Stream or something like this. Of course, I never read it.
Yes, and okay, that's about the Americans. And was, for example, some French literature, I mean contemporary French literature translated? I mean Sartre or Simone de Beauvoir.
Yeah,
were they translated to?
Yeah,
to Bulgaria?
I think French literature was much more translated than American one or than British one, because we had Humanité or this French, French left movements we have, and that's why we had we had Georges Perec, and it was for me was very influential in a way. We had this life, a manual for use, and it was like also Raymond Queneau, you know, this book, Exercises of Style. Yeah, and this was also very open-minded for me. Very, it was a great stimul to invent, to think about the things. Of course, we had all French classics, but lately, one of the French philosophers who was very important for my generation, but we had his books only after 1989, or on the eve of 1989, was Michel Foucault. So Foucault was illegally, spread out among us. We were in the last courses at the university, but when we found the words and the things and other of his books, they were really, they shaped us in the early 90s. Also, let me tell, Gaston Bachelard. You know, it's the Poetic of Space and this. I think it was published in the late 80s and was important also for our generation. And another book that shaped us, published very lately in Bulgaria, it was Borges, with the selected stories by Borges. It appeared for the first time in Bulgarian in 1988, very late. But for our generation, it was like, oh, you can write like this, we can write like this, and it was very important experience.
But, so it's now, I have a question, it's not directly about translation, but my impression is that when you tell about the books that you were reading, that maybe Bulgaria was not completely isolated from the West, because here we have, or they have always this idea of isolated countries.
Yes and no. You know, some of the books, actually we read some of the books that were not yet translated in Bulgaria, but translated in Russia, like Joyce. Ulysses appeared maybe 15 years before to have Bulgarian translation. There was a Russian one. Yes, but in fact we didn't have, let's say, we had beat poets a bit late, or we had only one or two poems published in an anthology of American poetry. So you could have only one or two or three poems by great writers, by Ferlinghetti, all this beat generation. We were very curious for this, but they were not allowed like separate books.
Yes, I understand. And how was the quality of the translation as far as you know?
We had one of the great translators from English, Krstan Djankov, I should mention one of the names, who was very important translator. So the generation now should know that in these times of translation, it was very difficult for translation because you didn't have all these tools that we had now, of course, Google and this. But not only this, if you want to make some research, you translate something that in the book there is some biblical phrase, and you need to compare this with the Bible, but the Bible was forbidden. So I know the stories by famous Bulgarian translators who should ask for agreement, or they should ask the people, the chair of the National Library, to allow them to go into the locked room and to read from the Bible, to check what they translate with the real Bible, and then they were again unlocked, and anyway it continues. So this was the way that the people looked for the help for the translation.
So if translators are kind of messengers with the other worlds, I mean, now you are a writer translated to many languages, I don't know how many, but what is your relationship with your translators? Do you talk to them?
Yes, of course. I'm suspicious to the translators that never asked me and never talked with me. I really like to have talk with my translators, with almost most of them I'm a friend, and I keep their letters, their questions, and the translators, of course, you know, they are the best readers that we could have. So I have some translators, like my Danish translator, who read very carefully, and every time she finds 4 or 5 mistakes made by myself in my novels or short stories. So I really I really believe to my translators, and I'm in constant talk with them.
And do you read sometimes your translations in languages you know, for example, in English or
When we
French?
worked on the English translation, we worked together with my translator. She is living in Sofia, and so we had some. I read some of the paragraphs, because my books are not easy for translation. There are many allusions to the other books, to other quotations. So I'd like to help with this.
And the last question, do you have sometimes impression when you read in English that it's another book? I mean, because, you know, another language, your book is another book.
But you know, I have this impression even when I read my books after 5 years in Bulgarian. So it's always another book. Yeah, you cannot step twice into the same book, if we paraphrase Heraclitus. In English, no, I've never read. When the book is published, I read only if I needed to read something in my public readings. And then I could find something that could be better or not. But I have this impression with all my books in Bulgarian as well.
And the very, very last question, if you could define the role of a translator today in our world, because we always talk about authors, writers, and rarely about translators. And I think translators are I mean, if we think that there is something like Weltliteratur, then we need translators.
It's the invisible voice that must be really your voice. It's like the invisible Virgilius who lead the reader into your inferno. That's the translator, yeah. Virgilius.
Okay, thank you very much.